Sofia Reyes had a rule about beautiful things. She didn't trust them. Beautiful things were always hiding something: a crack underneath the paint, a rotten smell under the flowers, a knife behind the smile. She had learned this the hard way, the kind of way that leaves a mark you carry on the inside where no one can see it. So when she walked into the Crestwood Academy library at 7 in the morning with 2 coffees balanced in her hands and a stack of borrowed books tucked under her arm, she wasn't looking for anything beautiful. She was looking for a quiet corner and 4 hours of uninterrupted work before her shift at the cafe started at noon. She found neither. What she found instead was a boy sitting in her chair. Not her chair in the official sense. The library had no assigned seating. But that corner table near the third window, the one that caught the morning light at exactly the right angle, where the old oak outside tapped its branch against the glass when the wind blew, where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest, that was her chair. She had been sitting there every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months. The librarian, Mrs. Petra, knew it. The cleaning staff knew it. Apparently, this boy did not. She stood there for a moment, both coffees getting cold, staring at the back of his head. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. One hand resting flat on the table, the other scrolling through a phone with a screen so expensive it caught the light like a mirror. He was wearing a black jacket that probably cost more than Sofia's rent. His posture had the particular kind of relaxed confidence that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. She knew who he was. Everyone at Crestwood knew Adrian Voss. Not just because he was the most talked about student on campus. Not just because he was unreasonably good-looking in the way that made people forget their own names. But because his father was Elias Voss, and Elias Voss was not a name you said too loud, in any room, at any time of day. The Voss family owned half the city. They had owned it for longer than the city had been a city. They were the kind of old that didn't sit in textbooks. The kind of powerful that didn't need newspapers. And Adrian was the heir to all of it: every shadow, every dollar, every secret, which meant that in every room he walked into, the air changed. Sofia set her coffees down on the table across from him. Loudly. He looked up. And there it was, the thing that made him dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his family name. His eyes were dark, the color of deep water, and they moved over her face with a kind of slow attention that made her feel like she was being read rather than seen. Not many people had eyes like that. Eyes that actually looked. She held his gaze. "You're in my seat," she said. He didn't move. He tilted his head slightly, the ghost of something that wasn't quite a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "The chair doesn't have your name on it." "No," she said. "But you're still in it." She pulled out the chair across from him, sat down, opened her laptop, and went back to her work. She felt him watching her for a moment. Then, he looked back at his phone. Neither of them spoke for the next 40 minutes. When he finally stood to leave, he paused beside her chair. "Same time Thursday," he said. She didn't look up. "I'll be here." He left. She waited until his footsteps faded before she let out the breath she'd been holding. 3 floors above the library, in a study room that smelled like leather and expensive coffee, Lucas Mercer was losing a card game and losing it badly. Lucas was Adrian's oldest friend, which meant he was also the person most qualified to say, without hesitation, that Adrian was bored out of his mind and had been for months. Bored in the way that only very powerful, very intelligent people get bored dangerously. Restless in the specific way that leads to decisions nobody can walk back. "I'm just saying," Lucas said, throwing down his cards, "you need something to do. Something real. You've been sleepwalking through this whole semester." Adrian dropped into the chair across from him and picked up the deck. "I'm fine. You spent 40 minutes this morning sitting in a library. You never go to the library." "I was curious." "About what? The Dewey Decimal System?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. He shuffled the cards with a practiced ease, not looking at them. "There's a girl," he said. "In the library." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "She told me I was in her seat." Lucas stared at him. "She told you?" "Adrian Voss." That you were in her seat. Yes. And she meant it. She meant it. A slow smile spread across Lucas's face. It was not a kind smile. I'll bet you can't get her to fall for you, he said. 30 days. All the way. She has to genuinely believe you care about her. If you pull it off, I'll cover your debt with Cain. If you don't, he leaned forward, you owe me the Ducati. Adrian looked at him across the table. He should have said no. He knew, somewhere beneath the boredom and the restlessness, that this was the kind of thing that leaves damage. Not to him. He was past the age of being damaged by games. But, to whoever the girl was, the one with the cold coffees and the steady eyes and the nerve to hold his gaze like she already knew something about him he didn't. Done, he said. He said it the way he said most things. Like the consequence was already handled, already somewhere far behind him, already not his problem. Her name was Sophia Reyes, and he found this out by asking Mrs. Petra, who told him with the guilty eagerness of someone who found the whole situation romantic and had already decided he was a hero in a love story. He spent 2 days simply watching. Not obviously, he wasn't clumsy about things like this. He sat in the library at the right times, walked the same path she walked, ate lunch in the courtyard she crossed on her way to the science building. He was gathering information the way he had been taught to gather it. Quietly. Completely. What he found was not what he expected. Sophia Reyes was a scholarship student. Full academic merit, no financial backing, no family connections to the school. She worked 2 jobs, the campus cafe in the mornings and a late shift at a small bookshop on Crane Street 3 nights a week. She was studying medical biology, which was the kind of degree that required the kind of focus that left no room for socializing, and she mostly kept to herself. She had one close friend, a girl named Priya who studied law and who seemed to spend most of their time together lecturing Sophia about sleeping more. She had no known boyfriend. No recent relationship history he could find. She also had, as far as he could tell, no interest in him whatsoever. This was unusual enough to be interesting. Most people at Crestwood treated Adrian with one of 2 responses, fear or flirtation, and both came from the same source. His name. His face. The way the air changed when he walked into a room. Sophia Reyes had looked him in the eye and told him to move, and then opened her laptop and forgotten he existed. He found this, against all reasonable expectation, the most interesting thing that had happened to him in months. Thursday morning, he was in the library at 7. Not in her chair this time. He took the one across from it and was already reading when she arrived at 7:12 with her 2 coffees and her stack of books. She stopped when she saw him. Just briefly, a half-second pause that she smoothed over immediately before sitting down across from him. You came back, she said. Not warmly. Not coldly either. You said you'd be here. I said I would be here. I didn't invite you. He smiled. It was a real one, which surprised him slightly. I know. She looked at him for a moment, that same reading rather than seeing look, and then she opened her laptop and started working. He opened his book. They sat in silence for an hour and a half. He got up to get them both coffee. At one point, he noticed her first cup had gone cold, and set a fresh one down beside her without comment. She looked at it. Then, at him. Then, back at her screen. Thank you, she said. Quiet. Like the words were carefully weighed. It was such a small thing. And it sat in his chest in a strange way that he filed away and ignored. By the second week, they had a rhythm. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, library, her seat, across from each other. He started bringing coffee instead of her having to carry 2 cups. She started leaving the chair across from hers free, which she refused to acknowledge as the invitation it clearly was. They talked occasionally, not much, but real talk, the kind that happened between people who weren't performing for each other. He asked her once why she chose medical biology. She said something her mother used to tell her about blood being the place where the body keeps its secrets, and then she closed that door and moved on before he could step through it. Blood keeping secrets. He noticed that. filed it. He was good at the game. He knew how to be present in exactly the right amount, interested without being intense, warm without being obvious. He knew how to make a person feel seen without making them feel exposed. He had done this before, though never quite like this, never with someone who made him work for every centimeter of ground. But something was happening that he hadn't accounted for in his arrangement with Lucas. He wasn't sure when it started exactly. Sometime around the second Thursday. He had been watching her explain something from her biology textbook to a freshman who'd wandered over looking lost, and she had used her pen to draw a small diagram on a napkin, 3 quick lines, a circle, a label, and handed it to the girl like it was nothing, like she had all the time in the world and none of it was precious, which he knew was absolutely not true. Her time was the one thing she never had enough of. And, he had thought, sitting across from her, she is genuinely good. Not performing goodness. Not building social credit. Just good. The functional, unsentimental kind that shows up in small ordinary moments because it's simply what's there. He caught himself thinking about her on Friday afternoon, which was not part of the arrangement. He did not tell Lucas this. It was on a Thursday in the 3rd week that he first noticed something was wrong. Not wrong with her behavior toward him, she was exactly the same, steady and dry and quietly funny in ways that arrived before you expected them. But wrong in the way she looked when she thought no one was watching. A tension she carried in her shoulders at certain moments, a kind of watchfulness, the way a person stands when they are used to looking over their own shoulder. He had arrived early that day and seen her from across the library before she spotted him. She was on her phone. Her expression was careful. Controlled in the specific way of someone controlling themselves hard. She spoke quietly for about 2 minutes and then ended the call and sat very still for 10 seconds with both hands flat on the table and her eyes closed. When she opened them, she was already smiling. Already ordinary Sophia again. He took his seat. She brought 2 coffees today, she'd beaten him there, and pushed one across the table. He thanked her. She opened her laptop. They worked. They talked a little. He made her laugh once, which was always slightly absurd, like a small coin dropped in a large room, you heard it, and then you were listening for the next one. When she left at 11, he watched her go. She stopped just outside the library doors and pulled out her phone. Sent a message. Fast, practiced, like she had sent that same message 100 times before. Then, she put the phone away and walked to class. He sat with his coffee going cold. Something under the surface of her. Running the whole time. He had been so focused on the game, on the 30 days, on the careful architecture of manufactured feeling, that he had missed it. What was Sophia Reyes watching for? What was she so carefully not afraid of? He picked up his own phone and made a call. Find out everything you can about Sophia Reyes, he said. I mean everything. He didn't tell Lucas about this call either. He sat in her chair for a long time after she left, in the quiet morning library, with the old oak tapping at the window, thinking about a girl who looked over her shoulder and, then, smiled like nothing was there. The file came back in 48 hours, and what was in it made Adrian sit down slowly and not get up for a long time. Sofia Elena Reyes. 22 years old. Born in a small town called Holloway, 3 hours south of the city, which was the kind of town that existed in the exact gap between being somewhere and being nowhere. Mother deceased 4 years ago, complications from a blood disease that had a long medical name and a short brutal story. Father unknown. No siblings. No living family of record. She had won the Crestwood Merit Scholarship at 19 against 400 applicants, on the basis of academic performance and a personal essay that the selection committee had apparently still talked about, though none of them would say exactly what it said. She worked at the campus cafe and the bookshop on Crane Street. She paid rent on a studio apartment that was technically off campus but technically within walking distance of everything, which was why she walked everywhere. She had no car. She had a monthly transit pass she mostly didn't use. This was all normal. What was not normal was the rest of it. Starting 6 months ago, 2 months before Adrian had even begun his semester at Crestwood, Sophia had begun making regular deposits into a private account that had no institutional trail. The money didn't come from her jobs. It didn't match any scholarship disbursement. It was cash, deposited in person, always at a branch on the other side of the city. She had been seen, on 5 separate occasions, entering a building on Merchant Street that belonged to a man named Dorian Vale. Dorian Vale was not a name Adrian heard often. But, when he did hear it, it was always in the same kind of sentence, the kind spoken in low voices, with doors closed, by men who chose their words like they were choosing weapons. Dorian Vale was a broker. Not of property or stocks. Of arrangements. He dealt in the particular currency of old alliances and older debts, and the clients who visited his office were people whose problems couldn't be solved with lawyers. People who needed protection. Or people who needed to provide it. Adrian read the file twice. Then, a third time. Then, he set it down on his desk and looked out the window at the dark campus below, where the streetlights turned the wet pavement the color of old copper, and he thought about a girl who smiled like nothing was there and looked over her shoulder when she thought no one was watching. He thought about what she had said. About blood keeping secrets. He thought about her mother. He thought about a blood disease with a long name. He thought about how Sophia had chosen medical biology with the kind of purpose that didn't come from curiosity. It came from something that had already happened. Something she was trying to understand, or undo, or outrun. He thought about all of this and arrived at a conclusion that sat in his stomach like cold water. Whatever Sophia Reyes was doing in that library every Tuesday and Thursday morning, whatever she was being, steady and dry and quietly funny, pushing a coffee across the table, it was not the whole of her. She was managing something. And the thing she was managing had something to do with Dorian Vale. And Dorian Vale's clients, in his father's world, only ever had one kind of problem. He didn't go to the library on Tuesday. Not because he was pulling back. Because he needed to think, and he could not think clearly when she was across from him with her coffee and her 3-line diagrams and the way she occasionally looked up from her screen when he was quiet too long, like she was checking on him. Like she had been checking on him for a while. Lucas called him twice. He didn't answer. He went to Merchant Street instead. He did not go inside the building. He stood across the street, in the narrow shadow between a closed flower shop and a dry cleaner, and he watched the entrance for 40 minutes. 3 people went in. One of them he recognized an old name from his father's court, a man called Sable, who handled problems his father didn't want to put his signature on. He went home and stood in his apartment and stared at the far wall for a long time. Then, he called his father's head of security, a man named Roth, who had spent 20 years doing only 3 things: listening, watching, and not saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. Dorian Vale, Adrian said. What's the current arrangement? Roth was quiet for a moment. Current arrangement is terminated, sir. That was 8 months ago. The dissolution was not clean. Meaning there are still people who feel a debt was not honored. On both sides. A pause. There has been some concern about a particular thread. One that runs close to home. Your father is aware. I didn't ask if my father was aware. I asked about the thread. Another pause. Longer this time. There's an intelligence line, Roth said carefully. Someone has been funneling information about the household. Movement, schedules, vulnerabilities. It began approximately 7 months ago. We have not identified the source. 7 months ago. 1 month before Sophia had begun making deposits. 1 month before she had first appeared in the records connected to Dorian Vale. Adrian set down his phone very carefully and did not pick it up again for a long time. She was already there on Thursday. 2 coffees. His laptop plugged in at the outlet she'd memorized the location of because he always forgot to charge before he left. Her own work spread out in front of her, neat in the particular controlled way of someone who needs their external space to compensate for internal noise. He sat down. She looked up and gave him the small nod that passed for greeting between them, and he gave it back, and something in his chest did a thing he didn't have a name for and didn't particularly want one. You missed Tuesday, she said. Not accusing. Just noting. Something came up. She accepted this with a slight tilt of her head. "How are you?" she asked. And, the way she asked it, not as a social formality, not as a conversation starter, but, with a quality of actual attention that made the question feel different from how it usually sounded. "How are you?" as a real inquiry. From someone who wanted the real answer. He looked at her. "I've been better," he said. She nodded. Looked back at her screen. "Okay," she said. "Me too." They worked in silence for 20 minutes. "Then," she said, without looking up, "my mother used to say that the days you skipped the library are the days you needed to be in the library." A pause. Her fingers kept moving on the keyboard. I think she meant something bigger than libraries. But, I liked it when she said it about libraries specifically. He was quiet. "What was she like?" he asked. He had read the file. He asked anyway. Sophia was still for a moment. "She made the best rice I've ever had and the worst decisions I've ever witnessed, and I would give anything to ask her advice right now." Her voice was level. Matter of fact. "She got sick. She didn't tell me until she couldn't hide it anymore." A beat. She always thought protecting people meant keeping things from them. The file. Dorian Vale. The deposits. The thing she was managing. He looked at the side of her face. The careful set of her jaw. Like mother, like daughter. "Sophia," he said. She looked up. He almost said it. Almost put the question down between them, the one that had been sitting in the back of his mouth for 3 days. Instead he said, "The coffee is good today." She stared at him for a second. "That's what you were going to say?" "Yes." She looked at him a beat too long. Then, the corner of her mouth moved. "You're very weird, Adrian Voss." "Yes," he said. She went back to her work. He went back to his, and he told himself that whatever she was doing, whatever game she was playing, whatever she had walked into, it was her choice. She was managing it. She had been managing it for months without help from anyone. He told himself this for about 4 more minutes. Then, he picked up his phone under the table and sent a message to Roth. "I want full surveillance on Dorian Vale's movements. Starting now. And, I want the intelligence thread traced from the beginning." Lucas found him on Friday at the gym, and stood at the edge of the weights rack with his arms crossed and an expression that meant he had been patient for as long as his patience lasted, which was not long. 20 days, Lucas said. Adrian didn't stop lifting. 21 days left. "You're halfway. And, from what I can tell, she lets you buy her coffee and sit in her library." "That's it." Lucas tilted his head. "Are you even trying?" Adrian set the bar down. "I'm trying. It doesn't look like trying. It looks like you're actually sitting in a library every Tuesday and Thursday morning because you want to." He was. He was sitting in the library every Tuesday and Thursday morning because he wanted to. Because of the way she explained things, clearly, without condescension, like the assumption was always that the other person was capable of understanding. Because of how she laughed. Because of the coffee she plugged his laptop in to charge. Because of the way she said "me too," like shared difficulty was simply the weather, present, acknowledged, not a crisis. "The 30 days, Lucas said. "The Ducati. Are we still on?" Adrian looked at him. "We're still on," he said. He said it. He heard himself say it. And, somewhere between his mouth and his chest, the words went wrong. What happened on the following Monday had nothing to do with the library. Sophia was walking back from the science building at 4 in the afternoon when a black car pulled up to the curb ahead of her and a man got out. Not threatening, not directly, he was well-dressed, hands visible, face calm. But, he placed himself in her path with the particular deliberateness of someone who had done this before. Adrian saw this from across the courtyard. He was 40 meters away. He watched Sophia stop. Look at the man. Something passed over her face, not fear. Recognition. She said something. The man said something back. She reached into her bag, took out a small envelope, and handed it to him without hesitation. The man got back in the car. The car left. Sophia watched it go for 3 full seconds. Then, she adjusted her bag strap, turned around, and kept walking to wherever she had been going. Adrian stood in the middle of the courtyard for a long moment. The intelligence thread. The deposits. Dorian Vale. A man in a black car receiving an envelope on a Monday afternoon like it was a routine. Like it had been a routine. He moved. He caught up to her at the edge of the courtyard, fell into step beside her. She glanced at him, not startled, she never startled, and raised an eyebrow. "Did you need something?" she said. "Who was that?" "A beat. Very small. Very controlled. An old acquaintance," she said. "From Holloway?" She stopped walking. She turned and looked at him. Not the reading rather than seeing look this time. Something different. Sharper. Like a door had been opened that she hadn't decided to open. "How do you know where I'm from?" she said. He held her gaze. "I looked you up." The silence between them had weight. "Why?" she said. He didn't have a good answer for this that didn't involve either the truth or a lie, and he found, standing in front of her in the cold afternoon light, that both felt equally wrong. "I was curious," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Her face was very still in the way of someone making a decision. "Okay," she said. Flat. Final. Like she had filed the answer under a category and closed the drawer. She walked on. He stood there. And it was only later, turning over the moment in his head, that he understood what he had seen in her face in that half second before she went still. Not surprised that he'd found out where she was from. Relief. Like she had been waiting for him to start asking questions. Like she had wanted him to. The report from Roth came back 6 days later, and what it said made everything rearrange itself every Tuesday, every Thursday, every coffee, every careful word she had said and not said into a shape he hadn't seen coming. The intelligence thread didn't lead where they'd expected. It didn't lead to Dorian Vale's people. It led away from them. Someone had been feeding false intelligence, wrong schedules, wrong movements, wrong vulnerabilities to the people circling the Voss household. Information that looked real but consistently sent them to the wrong places at the wrong times. For 7 months, every attempt to map the household's exposure had been routed into dead ends. Not leaked. Redirected. Someone on the inside of the threat had been quietly, methodically making the Voss family invisible to it. Roth had traced the source of the redirected information through 3 layers of intermediary to a single anonymous line. The line ran to a prepaid phone. The phone was registered to a bookshop on Crane Street. Adrian sat with this for a long time. A girl who chose medical biology because her mother died of a blood disease that only affects a certain kind of bloodline. A girl who walked into Dorian Vale's office not as a client seeking protection, but as a source. An asset. Feeding information from the inside of a network that had been circling his family. Feeding the wrong information. For 7 months. Alone. He thought about her saying, she always thought protecting people meant keeping things from them, and then, he thought about the bet. About Lucas. About 30 days. About the Ducati. About himself. He sat very still in his apartment for a long time. Then, he put on his jacket and walked out. He had something to say to Lucas first. After that, he had something else to do entirely. Lucas was at the bar on Halden Street when Adrian found him, which was where Lucas usually was on Thursday evenings when he was not being a responsible person, which was most Thursday evenings. He was mid-drink, mid-laugh, leaning against the counter with the particular ease of someone who had not yet had enough to regret anything. 2 other people from their circle were with him, a girl named Cassie who laughed at everything and meant none of it, and a quiet, watchful young man named Patrick who worked for Adrian's father and spoke rarely and observed always. Adrian did not sit down. Lucas looked up and caught something in his expression and straightened slightly. "Hey," he said. "You look, the bet is done," Adrian said. Lucas blinked. "What do you mean, done? There are 9 days left." "I mean it's done. Finished. I'm ending it." A pause. Lucas set down his glass slowly. "You're ending it." He looked at him carefully. "You actually fell for her." Adrian said nothing. "Adrian." Lucas's voice had shifted, still light, but with something underneath it now. Uncertainty. "It was a game." "You know she doesn't actually, I know what she does and doesn't know," Adrian said. His voice was level. "I'm ending it. The Ducati is yours. We're finished with this conversation." Lucas opened his mouth. Closed it. Patrick, in the corner, said nothing and watched everything. Adrian left. He stood on the street outside and breathed the cold night air and felt the full weight of what he had done, not the bet, not the ending of it, but all the weeks in between. All the Tuesdays and Thursdays. The coffee he'd brought because she always had two and one always went cold. The way he had asked the right questions and listened to the answers with the skill of a person who knew how to make someone feel safe and had been using that skill as a tool. He had been real with her. He had. Somewhere around the second week, it had stopped being performance. But it had started as performance, and she didn't know that, and the starting mattered. He started walking toward Crane Street. The bookshop was still open at 9:30, which surprised him. He stood outside for a moment looking through the glass at the warm amber light inside, the shelves running floor to ceiling, the small reading chairs in the back corner. A cat sat on the front counter staring at nothing with the particular authority of cats. He went in. She was behind the counter, pencil behind her ear, sorting a new delivery of paperbacks into 2 stacks, kept and returned. She looked up when the bell above the door rang and went still. Not startled. Never startled. Just still. "We're about to close," she said. "Sophia." She looked at him for a moment. Then, she came around the counter, and he thought she was going to walk past him to the door, to lock it, to politely end the conversation before it started. Instead, she stopped 2 feet in front of him and crossed her arms. "What's wrong?" she said. Not, "Why are you here?" Not, "It's 9:30. Not, "This is strange." What's wrong? Because that was who she was. She looked at people and read what was there and asked about the actual thing. He owed her the actual thing. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "When we first met in the library," he stopped. Started again. "Lucas made a bet with me. That I couldn't make you believe I cared about you. In 30 days. He held her gaze. "I took it." The room was very quiet. The cat on the counter continued staring at nothing. Sophia's expression didn't change for a long moment. Then, something moved through it, not the collapse he had been bracing for, not the anger he had been prepared for, something quieter and more complex. Something almost tired. She uncrossed her arms. "Okay," she said. He stared at her. "Okay. I heard you." She turned and walked back behind the counter, picked up a paperback, and put it in the kept pile. "Is there more?" He stood there. He had prepared for many possible reactions. This was not one of them. "Are you?" He stopped. "You're not going to say anything?" I said okay. She picked up another book. "What would you like me to say, Adrian?" "Something," he said. "Anything. You should be angry." She put the book down. Looked at him across the counter with the direct, careful attention he had spent 6 weeks being studied by. "I know about the bet," she said. The air in the room changed. "You, Lucas, mentioned it." "Not to me directly. About 2 weeks in. He was talking to someone at a party I was walking past and I heard him describe it." She tilted her head. He said 30 days. A bet with Adrian. The Ducati. She paused. He thought I wasn't there. I was there. He processed this. He processed the fact that for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, she had known about the bet and had still shown up to the library. Had still pushed the coffee across the table. Had still made him laugh, and let him make her laugh, and said me too like shared difficulty was simply the weather. Why didn't you? He stopped. Stop coming? She was quiet for a moment. Because that wasn't the point. What was the point? She looked at him steadily. You were the point, Adrian. Not the game. You. He stood on the other side of the counter in a bookshop on Crane Street at 9:30 on a Thursday night and felt the floor of the conversation drop away from under him. I don't understand, he said. Though he was beginning to. Sit down, she said. She came around the counter again and went to the reading chairs in the back corner and sat in one of them, tucking her feet underneath her, and he followed because there was nothing else to do. She told him in the way she did everything plainly, without performance, choosing words the way she sorted books into 2 stacks. Kept and returned. What mattered and what didn't. Her mother had been sick for 3 years before she died. The disease was specific to a bloodline, old blood, the kind that carried markers that didn't show up in standard medical records. Sophia had spent the first year after her mother's death doing what anyone does when they lose someone to something they don't understand. She had gone looking for answers in the only place she knew to look, more information. What she found instead was a network. Not a good one. Not people who wanted answers. People who wanted leverage. They had known about the bloodline for longer than her mother had been sick, and they had been using that knowledge to map the families connected to it, gathering information about their movements, their vulnerabilities, their houses. She had been 19 and she had done something that, looking back, she would never call brave because it hadn't felt like courage. It had felt like the only available option. She had gone to Dorian Vale and offered herself as a source. A false source. I gave them what they wanted, she said. Or what they thought they wanted. Schedules. Routes. Household details. All wrong. She looked at her hands. Dorian had a network inside the people circling your father's house. I fed wrong information through that network for 7 months. They spent 7 months planning around movements that never happened, vulnerabilities that didn't exist. You knew who my father was, Adrian said. I knew about your family before I knew about you. And then, you came to Crestwood. On a scholarship. Her voice was dry but not defensive. I earned the scholarship, Adrian. I also chose this school specifically. Both of those things are true at once. He sat with this. You sat in the library, he said slowly, because you were waiting for me to notice you. I sat in the library because I study better in libraries and you kept stealing my chair. A small pause. And, yes. I needed you to see me. Why? She looked at him. Because the network knew there was a source feeding them false information. They were closing in on tracing it. And, the only way to stay ahead of them, she stopped. The only person with enough reach to shut it down completely was someone inside your family. Someone who could end the arrangement cleanly, from above. She was quiet. I needed to get you to ask questions. I needed you to start pulling the thread from your end. He thought about her stopping when he said Holloway. The relief in her face that he had registered and misread. You needed me to find the file, he said. I needed you to do what you did. Yes. You let me. He stopped. You let me think I was, he stopped again. This whole time you were managing it. Managing you, she said, is the wrong word. What's the right word? She thought about it. Trusting, she said. He looked at her. I trusted that if you started looking, you'd find the right things. That you'd be smart enough, and honest enough, and she stopped. I trusted you before you gave me a reason to. He sat in the reading chair in the back corner of a bookshop with the quiet wrapping around them like something held in both hands, and he did not know what to do with the specific ache of being seen clearly, known fully, and trusted anyway. "The bet," he said. "You knew about it. You kept coming." "Yes." "Why?" And here she was quiet for a moment longer than usual. The cat from the front counter had silently relocated itself to the top of the nearest bookshelf and sat watching them both with judicial disinterest. "Because somewhere in the middle of all of it," she said, "I stopped being strategic about it." She said this the way she said most things, plainly, without drama, without making it smaller than it was. "I liked sitting across from you. I liked the coffee. I liked the way you listened." A pause. "I know what you were doing and I know why you started it. And I also know that it changed. I could tell." "That's not a judgment, Adrian, it's just what I saw." He was quiet for a long time. "I ended the bet tonight," he said. "Before I came here." "I know." A small something crossed her face. "Roth told me you'd made contact with him. I figured the timeline was about right." He stared at her. "Roth works for my father." "Roth also had a cousin in Holloway," she said. "We've had an arrangement of our own for about 5 months. He helped me stay ahead of the trace." She paused. "He's very discreet." Adrian looked at the ceiling of the bookshop. Then, back at her. "Is there anyone in this situation," he said slowly, "who has been operating without a secondary plan?" "You," she said. "You were the only person going in clean." And, somehow, absurdly, impossibly, he laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that arrives before you decide to let it, and she watched it happen with an expression that was not quite a smile but was the thing that lives just before a smile. "Sophia," he said, when it faded. I owe you an apology." "You ended the bet," she said. "I'll take it." "That's not the apology. The apology is for starting it the way I did. For sitting across from you all those weeks knowing what I had agreed to," and he stopped. "You were real with me from the beginning. Even when you had a plan. You were still real." He held her gaze. "I wasn't. Not at first. And that matters." She looked at him for a long moment. "It matters," she agreed. Apology accepted. Something settled between them. Not resolved, nothing this tangled resolves neatly in a single night in a bookshop. But settled. The way two things find their level when the surface stops moving. The situation with the network was handled in the following 2 weeks. Adrian brought it to his father with the full picture, the false intelligence operation, the 7-month redirected thread, the source. Elias Voss listened in silence and, then, looked at the file for a long time without speaking. He was not a man who showed surprise easily. But something in his face shifted when he reached the page about Holloway and a girl and a scholarship and 7 months of quiet, invisible work. "Who is she?" he said. "Someone I know," Adrian said. His father looked at him with eyes that had been reading people for longer than Adrian had been alive. "Bring her in," he said. "Properly. She's owed more than she's been given." The network's operation was dismantled over the course of 8 days. Dorian Vale's arrangement was closed cleanly this time, from above, with the kind of weight that meant it stayed closed. The people who had been circling the household found, one by one, that the ground had shifted under their plans in ways they could not account for and could not rebuild from. Sophia was not there for most of this. She was in the library on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, her 2 coffees, her 3-line diagrams, her biology textbook open to the chapter on cellular memory. Adrian brought the coffee now. Both cups. She let him. One Thursday, about 3 weeks after the night in the bookshop, she was working and he was watching the oak tree outside tap its branch against the glass, and she said without looking up, "You're staring." "I'm thinking," he said. "About what?" He looked at her. At the pencil tucked behind her ear. At the slight furrow between her brows when something in her reading wasn't adding up. At the way she held her coffee with both hands in the mornings because the library was always slightly cold. About the fact, he said, that you protected my family for 7 months and never asked for anything in return. She didn't answer right away. She wrote something in the margin of her notebook. I asked for one thing, she said. What? She looked up. For you to start asking questions. A pause. You did. He looked at her. That was all you wanted. I didn't say it was all I wanted. She went back to her notebook. I said it was what I asked for. He sat with this. The oak tapped the window. A freshman walked past their table carrying a stack of books that was clearly going to fall before she made it to the elevator. Neither of them pointed this out because she turned left toward the shelves at the last second and disappeared. Sophia, he said. I want to take you to dinner. She was quiet for a moment. Wrote one more thing in her margin. Okay, she said. Not warmly. Not coldly. In the measured, even way she accepted most things as a real thing, a considered thing, a thing she had already quietly made peace with wanting before it was offered. He smiled. She didn't see it. She was already back in her textbook. He didn't point this out either. There was one more thing. On a Tuesday morning, about 2 weeks after the dinner, which had been good, real, full of the kind of conversation that doesn't run out, Sophia arrived at the library to find Adrian already there. Not across from her chair. In her chair. She stopped. Set her 2 coffees down on the table. Looked at him. He looked back. You're in my seat, she said. He didn't move. The ghost of something that wasn't quite a smile at the corner of his mouth. The dark eyes. The steady attention. All of it exactly as it had been on the morning they met, except different in every way that wasn't visible. The chair doesn't have your name on it, he said. She sat down across from him. Opened her laptop. You're going to keep doing this, she said. Probably. She shook her head. The corner of her mouth moved. She went back to her work. Outside, the oak tapped its branch against the glass. The morning came in at the right angle through the third window. And Sophia Reyes sat across from the boy who had set out to use her and ended up understood by her, and she did what she had been doing every Tuesday and Thursday for months now. She showed up. Because that was what she did. Not because it was safe, not because it was smart, not because it had gone the way she planned. Because it was real. And real was the one thing she had never been able to walk away from.